We'll sample more of that later. But on Skype Live, I am joined by an amazing panel, and I'll start from my nearest left. I've got Angela Nje here, who is the director of Tiranjani Africa. How are you doing today?
Hi, how
Good.
are you?
Fine, thank you. Thank you so much for joining us. Then next to her is Mr. Amos Wekesa, who is the CEO of Great Lakes Safaris. How are you doing this evening?
Well, fantastic. Well, with a bit of challenges that we've been dealing with. How are you?
Right, that's good. Thank you so much for joining us all the way from Uganda. And then I've got with me, finally, but certainly not least, Dr. Carmen Mbigira, who is a tourism policy analyst for East African Community. Good evening and welcome. How are you doing today?
Greetings from Kigali.
Fantastic. Wonderful. So, Dr. Carmen, I just want to start with you, and we just want to understand what measures from a regional perspective should have already been placed even before the COVID-19 pandemic. What really should have been done even before this pandemic and any other matter for that reason, if it was to arise? What should have been done prior?
I think we had already started at the East African Community as a regional economic bloc to open our borders and to trade among ourselves. I think the East African single visa was already an initiative to realize that if we keep relying on our source markets far away from China, United States, or even Europe, I think this is a good reminder that tourism, for once, I hope that we're going to really appreciate its value and then realize that tourism is actually a trade. It's a trade sector. So you cross your borders, whether you are in Uganda, Kenya, Sudan, Tanzania, Burundi, or even DRC. We need to look at how we have been operating, whether it's from free movement of people, free movement of services and goods, and from, transfer of money, all those things we had started. I think this is a good reminder that we need to start our homework from our regional blocks before we look outside. And then also to kind of emphasize that from a business community, that this is a time to really think about tourism. I think even if we go post-crisis, we will see tourists going for opportunities to discover places near their homes. So if you look at the numbers from KTB or Uganda Tourism Boards, the numbers so small, there are Ugandans, there are Kenyans, there are Rwandans, there are Ugandans. So we needed to go back and then emphasize on the shift from inbound to domestic and regional tourism.
Right, thank you. And just Amos, perhaps you can comment on this. Is it that we have not diversified then tourism and we are still using traditional ways?
Yes, I think we found already a generation that believed in mainly the European market and the American market. And majorly because the people that have started out in tourism for many years were people that came from those countries originally to run businesses across East Africa and across Africa as well. But slowly we're seeing the indigenous movement of operators coming into play, and that is changing the game. If you look at, for example, Uganda is your number one source market on the African continent with about 200,000 people, and it's the third biggest, I think after the US and the UK for Kenya. A lot of people have picked a lot of interest, but because Kenya itself played a role in making sure that they do a lot of marketing within our markets, which is a fantastic test. But the thing is that we need to take advantage of the intra-Africa opportunities. I know that by 2030, we'll be having about 300 million people flying within Africa alone. And if you look at our population, it will be over 1 billion people, of course, at that time. And there will be a lot more resources among the people. Now, if you look at us as Uganda, we need to take advantage of the opportunity that exists close to us. There's so many Kenyans that will love our nightlife, our wildlife. Many guys would love to see the Nile. There are many of them. We've just not been able to tell you, but hopefully we shall be able to engage you as a country soon.
Right, and it's seeing that you've referred to, in the near future there will be the intra-Africa trade, and we need to take advantage of this. Maybe I can cross over to Angela and Jay here. What is expected in the next few months to come in this particular sector? Angela.
I think just picking up from what my colleagues are talking about is that people will want to travel closer to home. People will not want to take the risk to move further. So one of the things we have to look at is that as East African community, we did start trying to promote each other. And maybe now we can move even further and try and tap into other markets in Africa and promote intra-Africa travel. If you look at, statistically, take the number of people saying Nigeria. How many people are in Nigeria? If you take 10% of that and say they have some income to spend and travel into Kenya, that's a huge number, yeah? So that's just an opportunity that is there. Going on to what Amos was talking about earlier, most of the Ugandans come to Kenya as a holiday, as well as the Rwandese. They love the beach. So that is an opportunity that we could tap into or focus most of it. Most of our marketing, most of our resources into pulling in or attracting tourists into the country. And we can now just start thinking about, it's about re-strategizing, it's about rethinking our products, developing products that attract this sort of market, yeah? Because in the past, take the Kenya scenario, mostly what we do is safari and beach. But now we're saying we have Ugandans who in their country, nightlife is big. So can we develop products that actually tap into their interest so that we can pull them in? Can we redesign what we have so that it actually attracts this market, which, if you ask me, is more stable in terms of, think of even when we've had terrorist attacks, yeah? It's easier for an African to come into an African country as opposed to a European coming into an African country. So it's really what Amos and Carmen are saying is true. We have to look at the regional market. We have to look at intra-Africa travel and actually put more emphasis on it and build that capacity, yeah, for tourists, for tour operators, especially in the Kenya scenario, that we're not focusing 80% on just European travel.
Right. And even as we revisit the redesigning of a product that's best suited for the local person, I just want us to review one comment that came in online. We've got fellow Juan. Tourism and hospitality industry is the most affected from day one. Personally, I'm a casual waiter, but ever since the pandemic was announced in Kenya, have been jobless with no source of income. Pray for lockdown soon so we return to a normal life. And he continues to say the lockdown is the way to go because new cases keep coming up and we don't want the whole country to be infected. So maybe Angela, you can just comment on this, seeing that other countries have already begun to adopt the complete lockdown, and Kenya, we're in the curfew stage. Do you believe that indeed having a lockdown is probably one of the solutions that could aid the industry of tourism?
Okay, so if you look at cases like South Korea, yeah, the guys who were quick to put up the lockdown, their numbers are not as fast rising as the ones we've seen in the recent few days, yeah? So lockdown could be a possible solution. That I leave to the guys in the crisis management. However, when you talk in terms of jobs, it is inevitable. For sure, tourism is struggling. We have seen laws come up about labor, how to protect them. But there's one thing I want to firmly synthesize on, yeah? In the tourism industry, we've been pushing, and I'm sure Carmen and Amos can agree, is on developing sustainable business models that actually focus on human resource and how to manage human resource. But that is something in the tourism industry that we have not firmly put our foot on. So what has happened is that one of the, I think, reactions to COVID-19 has been, how do I cut down I'm not making enough money. I can see the scenario. So how do I cut down my expenses? And number one, we move to human resource, the labor. So, and that is why that Joanne is saying, I lost my job, because that's the first thing we think of. But if we had developed crisis management plans, crisis strategies well before, then we would be able to say we would work through a system where you don't have to let go of staff immediately, but you actually have a way of how you take it down. So that means that there was a strategy in place before. However, right now, what has happened is that we are reacting,
right.
and it's not us alone, yeah. It's mainly the whole world. Many people are reacting, and we're seeing so many job losses. We're seeing, people basically. It's just about humanity now,
right?
Yeah. So
yes.
if one of the things I think we could do after this is that every tourism business needs to have a crisis strategy plan. They need to have a crisis strategy.
Sorry to cut you short, Angela. We will definitely come back to you. We just have to resolve our view right now on television. So we have to take a short break. But when we come back, we have more to talk about this particular industry. So do stay with us.
Since late last year, the coronavirus COVID-19 has emerged as a serious healthcare threat. This is an infection that has gone global and no one has been spared. The government, through the Ministry of Health, has put in measures to keep Kenyans safe against COVID-19, which is currently rampant around the world, with new confirmed infections and death cases daily. Such sanitization and screening of visitors at this border post and across every entry point in the country is very vital in preventing the spread of the disease in the country.
I'm very happy about the screenings that are going on in Tanzania and Kenya. I think it's very proactive that you're thinking about stopping it at the border so that it does not spread.
It is scary that a single cough here can lead to an outbreak of epic proportions. In order to prevent that, the government has instituted measures to keep Kenyans safe.
The facility has all the equipments you need, from handling a basic patient up to ICU setting.
However, you also have a role to play in preventing spread of infections.
Citizen responsibility is the key to the success of this initiative and these measures. Let's all do what we have to do individually. And this is how we are going to defeat this disease.
It's just our general hygiene, okay? And that now means at workplaces, we should ensure that our work surfaces are clean.
Always ensure that nimefanya proper sanitation ya mikono. Every time na board matatu, lazima ni sanitize mikono.
We have faced many severe challenges as a nation, and we have always found a way to rise above them. COVID-19 is no different, and we will overcome the pandemic. Stop coronavirus. Follow all directives from the Ministry of Health. Wash your hands properly.
Welcome back. Thank you so much for choosing to stay with us right here on TV47. Remember, the conversation this evening is COVID-19 and the impact that it has had in the tourism sector. The hashtag to use tonight is Friday. And of course, you can engage with me on 22047 or call in on the number on your screen. Right before we took a break, Angela was actually speaking to us a little bit about the situation when it comes to employment. And I'd like to pick it up with Amos, just to talk a little bit more about the employment sector and how badly it's hitting those who are employed in this particular industry. So Amos.
Yeah, I think I need just to give people a bit of a perspective of what's happening worldwide. According to WTTC, which is the authority in as far as tourism is concerned, it is estimated that we will lose about 50 million jobs, generally speaking, if it goes on maybe for one more extra month or so. But that would be about 3% as well of the tourism GDP in many ways. It would be lost. Countries like the UK, I think last month alone, over 1 million jobs were lost in hospitality. In East Africa, of course, what has happened in Kenya is the same thing that has happened to Uganda. We've had so many people lose jobs, people that had lots of business booked out in advance. All of us were excited by February. We had a lot of business. Now, of course, as a business, we had a bit of a kitty, so we've sent out about 80% of our staff, but we paid up. They have full pay for this month. We're hoping we can pay the next month and probably go reducing to 50% with the top staff. But as players, we have also come together to engage our governments in as far as putting in good conditions that can help the industry survive. In Uganda, for example, we're engaging government to make sure that statutory payments like pay as you earn, withholding tax, NSSF are actually removed for a period of time so that the employers can be able to maintain their staff. We're also making sure we engage the government to engage banks. We have a lot of people who had picked a lot of interest, I think, across the region in investing in tourism and had borrowed money for a right reason because there's a lot of, I think, demand or growth across the region, including Uganda, picked up so well. And so these guys, we're asking government to make sure that the banks restructure their loans for, say, 5-6 months, so that, but on condition that they're able to keep or sustain the majority of their staff. It's not just saying, we're going to give you all these conditions and you're not going to keep your staff. I think that's what we're engaging guys on. But like my colleagues have said earlier on, it is true that all the tourism entities across Africa or across the world must have a strategy for crisis. I think we have been caught unawares.
Right. Thank you so much for that. And so I just want to listen to Dr. Carmen. How do we actually creatively ensure that when there are shocks such as these ones, we can actually cushion this space? I know that Amos has already mentioned a few of the measures that have already been taken, but then how can we creatively ensure that we can cushion this industry?
We need to place tourism in a clear context. If you look at how tourism in many African destinations or countries, tourism is embedded in a culture of public and policy ideology as an essential pillar to achieve our endless and demanding economic growth. And then to do so, we need to understand the value of tourism. And if we want to change the course of how we do business, we need to see our policies geared towards tourism being an agent of change to create sustainable jobs, to create sustainable investment, to open, whether it's monetary or fiscal policies, which engage small, medium enterprises, youth and women, all of us in the sector. So this crisis is really a radical wake-up. The way of thinking and doing business can't be the same. The economic reality now we need has to change and accommodate creativity and adjustments. I think it's in that line of thought that we need to adjust how we were doing business. And as I mentioned this morning in another webinar, I said that we are actually part of this, the problem. Let's be part of the solution to move forward.
Right. Oh, yeah. All right. Thank you very much for that. And we have a call that's coming in right now. Hello, TV47. All right, it's we've lost the caller. No problem. You can always call in and have this conversation. Now, Angela, what lessons have we learned, and more specifically, what can the government, the private sector, and citizens now do differently? Angela.
I think one of the things is that besides developing proper crisis management programs, and we now need to look at the situation such as we are not going to be starting over. It's not going to be business as usual. It's time we looked at things it's like a computer being rebooted, yeah? In East Africa, I am telling my fellow colleague members and my fellow tourism players is that we've actually been given a reboot, a restart for us to actually start from scratch, yeah? It is time for us to build our product. It's time for us to think of how we do our strategies, our marketing, and most importantly, our communication. And then when we talk about communication or even our products, we have to discuss inclusivity. Yeah, like Carmen was talking about sustainable practices. One of the things is that we've seen because of the history of how tourism was started, and Amos spoke about it, we always thought of that type of client as the only source market, but maybe we can now start to say that we can develop products that attract others. We can think of the local people where we do our tourism, because that is an aspect that was thoroughly left out in the type of products we've been offering, yeah? So we've been struggling as East Africa community when you look at CBTs, community-based tourism, yeah? So maybe this is a time for us to actually involve all these players and make it inclusive and start from there, because like I said, it's a computer being rebooted, yeah? I was saying we've just been given a fresh start. But again, like we were discussing, there's also challenges that come with that, yeah? There's conservancy issues, and I'm sure that's something probably Carmen or Amos would want to dive more into. But it's a chance for us to actually reboot. It's time for us to actually say, let's do it all from scratch and involve everyone.
Right. And so you've talked about it's a chance and a time for people in the industry to be rebooting. And maybe I can hear from Dr. Carmen. During this break, what would a smart person in the sector be doing right now?
I don't think there is any prescribed magic solution to the crisis. I think each stakeholder, every small business, whether you are large, medium, or small, whether you are owner of a hotel or a small guest house, or even at the destination level, tourism boards and DMOs, and then the type of businesses of Amos, who speaks from Uganda, whether you are at the local level, regional level, I think we need to look at this crisis and say, what do I depend on? What are my immediate interventions that I need to do first to survive? Because some businesses have to create opportunities for people to continue getting a salary. We have a commitment to the community. However, I think we need to look at this crisis and say, where are you located? What are your most pressing issues? What type of product do you have or service you offer? And what is the connectivity to the whole value chain? I think this is a whole, I would say, this is purely a new case study we have never studied before. I think this is the first time I hear no flight going anywhere in my lifetime. I think all of us, even though we want to prescribe a solution, we need to look at this from a holistic standpoint and say, what are the most pressing issues we need to address now? However, but I think, and then I would like maybe to say this with a lot of confidence, to say that we need to look at this crisis and say, how can we, from now, as an Africa's continent, we have to take control of this. Whether we set new rules, regulations.
Sorry, Dr. Carmen, the internet is a little bit unstable, and unfortunately, we have to now take a very, very short break. And when we come back, we'll be able to summarize and reach this end of this particular conversation. But do stay with us, and when we come back, we'll delve more into these matters.
My name is Sujata Kotam Raju. I am the National General Secretary of Hindu Council of Kenya. Namaskar to my dear sisters and brothers. Now this is the time everyone will have to take the responsibility to fight against this virus, not to spread further in this country. If at all, if you want to go out, maintain the social distance. Avoid going to the enclosed areas like supermarket, temples, churches, and any religious functions. Avoid shaking your hands and hugs, any form of physical contact. You can just say Namaste. For more information, dial 719 or *719#. Kamesha Corona.
Hey, Sospita son, tumefutwa wote.
Yawa, pia wewe?
Tumeachiliwa.
Si pia wewe unaweza anzisha biashara yako?
Na hii economy venye iko tough sana.
But not too tough for Mwananchi Credit.
Tutafanya aje?
Si niko na 5 good cars. We can get a quick logbook loan approved within 6 hours.
Nataka kuanzisha salon na spa. Hii haitatosa.
Si tuko na title deeds pay. We can still get more money using them. Get a quick approval within 6 hours using your logbook or title deed. Do not get stuck. Call Mwananchi Credit today. Si nilikuambia.
You are a big smart joke.
Mwananchi Credit. Investor in people.
Want to grow your business? You can simply do so on our 24-hour nationwide
on what creatively could be done in this sector to cushion it. And so perhaps if you can just finish that off for us, then we can cross over to something else. Dr. Carmen?
Yes, quickly, I would like to just add that we need, as some destinations in Africa and some countries, we need to take control of the future of our tourism sector. We need to set new regulations, new rules, but at the same time, I believe some destinations may be so desperate for economic recovery, development, that they will be willing to mortgage the future of our destinations, our communities, and our people. I think as we review our crisis management or our procedures, we need to bear in mind that this is the unique opportunity to shape the future of our industry from tomorrow.
Right, fantastic. Thank you very much. So, Amos, we've seen teleconferencing, mobile journalism, online conferences and concerts. How are people in this sector being innovative? Is it something that, is there anything that can be done, or is it like the airline industry where it's just flat and it's doom and gloom?
Well, I think there have been a few advantages in as far as this challenge is concerned. Of course, my colleagues have articulated their areas extremely very well, but I have seen governments within the region actually see value in this whole industry called tourism. There's been a lot of discussion in Uganda that we have never had before in as far as tourism is concerned. there's been a lot of projections, interest in trying to see how this works, because a lot of people didn't understand tourism. The population generally did not understand tourism, specifically for Uganda, because tourism is fairly new thing. We used to be the #1 tourism destination in East and Central Africa until 1971. But when Idi Amin came, we went down to 0. So the population that is there did not understand what tourism was all about. Today, people are starting to understand, each tourist who comes to the country eats 2 eggs a day. So where have the 20 million eggs potentially to be eaten going, And as best thinking like that, petrol stations, mechanics, and so on and so forth. But one thing that is also clear is that the industry is coming together like never before. I've never seen private sector in Uganda, for example, coming together and trying to find solutions that can work for everyone else. But I would like to say something that Dr. Carmen said in the break. She said, I think it's time now for the East African countries to think about conservation, because remember that the communities around national parks and around all these protected areas were surviving on that. Now, they will be looking for alternative sources of survival, and hunting might be one of the things. Poaching might be one of the biggest problems. Cutting of the forest within these places might be the other. So I think we need to push as players of the tourism industry to make sure that governments take this conservation discussion seriously during this particular time.
All right. I would like to read one of the views coming in from the viewers right here on social media. That's from Hebrews. He says, this is one of the industry that has been hugely affected by the pandemic. It creates a chain. Now, if tourism industry is affected, then the hotel and travel industry follows in the drain. And so this question goes to you, Angela. This is the final question, and I can hear my director actually telling me that our time is up. But, other sectors and other key players such as the supplies and the contractors and the food deliveries are all being affected. Does this scare away investors and potential investors and those who are already key players in the industry? And then what do we do from here on next?
I think one of the positives is that tourism is a resilient industry. We have seen ups and downs like possibly no other industry has seen, and mainly because we deal with the social aspect when it comes to business. We are dealing with people. So it shouldn't be something to scare investors away. It shouldn't be something to scare the people, the whole supply chain. It should be time for us to actually sit and say, moving forward, this is what we will do. And you had asked before, if you're a business person and you supply in this tourism industry, or you have a hotel or an airline, what would you be doing? Right now, I'd be thinking, where do I want to be 1 year from now? What success story do I want to give and say post-COVID, this is what happened and this is what I did and this is where I am? Because tourism has been tested time immemorial, since when I was young. But we have always stood firm. And like Amos said, now the government is taking tourism seriously because we contribute to a very big chain, Technology, agriculture, all that feeds into tourism, but nobody ever looked at it from that angle. So when we speak about sustainable development, now we have to spread our wings further and understand that tourism taps into all this. So it is our responsibility, my responsibility, your responsibility, when this is over, to give out those positive stories about East Africa.
All right,
it is us to spread the mission.
Yes, thank you very much for that. Sorry, I had to cut you short because our time is literally up. And so we just want to cross over to something a little bit very, very current. As of today, a 6-year-old boy succumbed to the coronavirus, while the number of coronavirus cases went up by 12. So now we are currently at 122. Elizabeth Mtuku has more on that story.
Have managed to test a total of 362 samples, out of which 12 people have tested positive for coronavirus disease. Out of this number, 11 are Kenyans and 1 Somali national. This now brings the total number of those who have tested positive for the disease in the country to 122. I am saddened to inform you that we have lost another patient to the coronavirus disease. The person, a 6-year-old male child, who was also ailing from other medical conditions and had been admitted to Kenyatta National Hospital. This now brings to 4 the number of those who have died as a result of this disease.
The second thing that the local textile industry is also capable of producing and has proven that it can produce is a personal protective gear that doctors require. With me here I have some samples which we'd like to show you. We also have some advanced progress in assembly and making of ventilators in Kenya. This morning all these samples were presented to the National Bureau of Standards for testing and for confirmation of our compliance with Kenyan standards. And starting Monday, we will have the discharge and the receipt of the certification from the Bureau of Standards. So I'd like to encourage all Kenyans, I think we've been all directed to wear masks.
Regarding the 6-year-old who died in Kenyatta National Hospital, of course, the necessary infection prevention control measures have been put in place, including quarantining of the staff that handled this particular deceased child. We have also been in contact with Kenyatta to ensure that that particular place has been disinfected and all those patients moved elsewhere. We are in the process, of course, of testing them because people who are in ICU, in terms of risk profile, they are at a very high risk of contracting COVID, and therefore we shall be able to monitor them within the necessary time period. We shall be able to deploy our testing regimen to be able to find out whether they've been infected or not, and based on that, be able to take appropriate measures.
All right, thank you very much for that story, Liz Mutuku. And indeed, we need to remember to stay safe, sanitize, and include and make sure we employ social distancing. And so now to finish this particular show, we're going into another exciting part, which is called the Celebrity Challenge. And so I have some questions for my very able guests right now. And I'm going to start with Amos Wekesa. And I'll ask you a question, and from the top of your head, you'll give me an answer. And that's the same for all my guests. So Amos, which wild animal are you most afraid of? Which wild animal are you most afraid of?
A hippo, because once nearly killed me.
Hippo, sorry, because?
Hippos, when they find you between water and where and they're grazing ground, you're dead. They don't kill more people in Africa, I think, compared to any other animal.
All right. Okay. All right. Dr. Carmen, what was your most expensive trip that you ever went for and ever took? Which was the most expensive trip you ever took? Where did you go?
Oh, good question. I'll say Singapore.
Well, all right. How so?
But it was worth it. Yes.
Was it a holiday? Was it for work?
It was work, and then I extended. But it was worth it.
All right. All right. Singapore, a wonderful country indeed. Very clean and very, very beautiful. Yes. I actually enjoyed that destination myself. I'd like to cross over to Angela. What was your which was your worst experience? What is the worst experience you've ever had in a hotel? And what did they actually do?
Interesting. I think usually it would be service. And the thing is, sadly it was an East African country. What happened is it's a recent thing, and I think Carmen was there as well, yeah? And I made an order for a lunch, and what I was brought for was something different.
Yeah. In Uganda.
In Uganda.
I invite you guys to Uganda again. All of you, including Liz.
All right. Okay. All right. Well, just one more extra bonus question for Amos. What was your favorite safari and where did you go to?
My favorite safari is always to Mason Falls National Park, because that's where you find the most powerful waterfalls on earth in Uganda. It's the biggest national park in Uganda. is where the whole of the Nile struggles to pass through 7 meters, falling 42 meters deep. There's nowhere in the world you find water gushing through a canyon like that, anywhere in the world.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. You've been a very wonderful panel to have this evening. And indeed, thank you also at home for joining me for Friday tonight. And so until next week, up next is Club 47, and I've been your host, Lucy Riley. My sign language interpreter has been Anne Wairimu, and you can continue to interact with us on all our social media platforms. Good evening.